Hey everyone, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. So this is the Lunch and Learn that I gave on January 18th. It's all about show hide conditions. So get excited, get ready to walk through the wonderful world of show hide conditions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through just a few slides that kind of set the stage a little bit to talk about what they are, why you want to use them. And then we'll jump into actually showing you how you'd use them in practice. And also I'm going to show you a couple other additional examples that are kind of outside the app that we're using to actually perform today's Lunch and Learn, which you should have a copy of as well. So feel free to follow along at home or at work, wherever you might be accessing the app. All right, so the basics. So what are they exactly? Well, show hide conditions are something an app developer can use to control what is displayed on the screen. I'm just reading from the slide because I think these are very succinct and good definitions of show hide conditions. So, and then why are they used? Well, they give users a more tailored experience that provides an appropriate level of content as well as the right kind of content. And so at a high level, I would say kind of beyond what's written here, 3 reasons why you would want to use them. 1, they make their dashboard a lot more interactive, a lot more dynamic. 2, it gives your users more control over being able to analyze and view the content that they're most interested in. And then the final reason is that allows you to really declutter the dashboard and really, as it says here, show the right level of content based on what the user is currently doing within the app. All right, so what's wrong with this dashboard? Well, and I should note this, this is not a Qlik dashboard. This is, I literally just Googled bad dashboards, and this is one of the ones that came up. So, there's actually lots of things that are wrong with this dashboard, but at a high level, I think the biggest thing is that it's completely cluttered, right? Like when you open this up, if you were to look at this, you really wouldn't know where to look, right? There's just so much content on here. And this kind of gets back to that idea of using show hide conditions to declutter and really provide more of a guided experience for your users. All right, so where can conditions be used for show hide? Well, there's really, I think, 3 different levels of hierarchy where you can use them. The first, at the highest level, is at the sheet level, and you can see listed on the right-hand side. It shows you the actual conditions and where they show up in the properties panel. And then the second level is the chart level, and then the third level is the chart property level, where you can choose to show or hide specific elements within a chart. Now, for purposes of today's Lunch and Learn, I'm actually going to be going in reverse order. So we're going to start off at the chart property level, then we'll go to the chart level, and then we'll wrap it up at the sheet level. All right, so other things to know about conditions. There are a couple other elements just to be aware of when we start talking about show hide conditions. One of them is variables. So a variable in Qlik Sense, it's a container really that stores a static value or a calculation. For example, a numeric or an alphanumeric value. It can also even store expressions if you want to make them a bit more dynamic. And so the other thing with variables that are nice is that when you're using them within an app, any changes that you make to a variable is actually applied everywhere that the variable is used. So anyone who's any sort of programming or development, you can appreciate this, right? It makes it a little bit more, it gives you the ability to make changes very quickly all across the app. And you can define variables in your variable overview, which I'll show in just a bit in today's Lunch and Learn, or you can do it within the script in a data load editor. That's not really going to be relevant to show hide conditions, but just as an FYI. Now, they are commonly used in if statements, and you can see a couple examples of if statements below, the first being a very generic sort of representation of if statements. So you have if, open parentheses, your condition. If it meets the condition, then something happens. If it doesn't, then something else happens, right? And then you can see down below it is showing you an example of a variable called vShow, where you might, as long as that condition is met, where vShow equals 1, then we want to probably show a chart or a visualization, else then we don't show that particular chart or visualization. Containers. So the container is an object that lets you add visualizations in a limited space. As it says here, you can also show or hide the visualizations inside the container based on conditions. So you're going to see this in action, both the variables and containers, in just a bit. All right, so with that being said, let's jump into the actual app. All right, so we are now in our app. It says Lunch and Learn Show Hide Conditions is the name of the app. And you can see the different sheets that we're going to be walking through. So let's start, as I mentioned, we're going to start at the chart property level. And we are going to use a conditional show for reference lines. So reference lines, if you've never used them, a great way to provide some additional perspective within your charts. And specifically, we're going to use a dimensional reference line that in this case we're going to use to highlight a significant date within our timeline as it relates to government spending. So the data that we're using in this app, this is actually data that's taken from usaspending.gov. And you can see all the spending across the government over the last few years here. You'll notice there's really a big spike here in November 26, 2019, and then you can see all the different fluctuations in spend over time. Now, we'll pretend that we are an analyst with Department of Health and Human Services, and we want to kind of get a better idea of spend. So I'll go over here to Funding Agency, and I'm going to filter on HHS. I select HHS, and you'll notice that there is a lot of spend that starts occurring in March of 2020, and then it kind of moves into April. And so why might that be the case? Why might there be a lot of spending that's occurring in March, April within HHS? Well, if you look down below, you'll see that we have a dimensional reference line here being used. Of course, this is when COVID-19 hit the globe, and of course, this is when HHS had to spend lots and lots of money. Right now, if I remove my filter, you'll notice that that reference line goes away. So let's work on actually adding that reference line to our template chart above. So this is the completed chart. In general, as we walk through these sheets, you'll notice that there should be a completed version of most of what we're doing, and then we're going to work on actually putting it together. What's nice is you got a little cheat, I want to say, not cheat sheet, but a cheat expression that you can use over here. So we're actually showing you the actual show condition that's being used. You can see we're using a function called get field selection. So we're saying for the field funding agency name, we want to find any selections that have been made. If it equals Department of Health and Human Services, then we want to display this particular dimension reference line. So let's go ahead and go into edit. And if you open up the app, there might be, potentially it could look like this. If it does, this is our simplified authoring view, but we're going to use the advanced option. So go ahead and make sure that's toggled on. And I'm going to select my timeline chart, and I'm going to go to add-ons. And you'll notice there is a section for reference line where you could add a reference line. That would be on the y-axis, so you're referencing the amount of spend. But in this case, we want to add in a dimension reference line, so a certain date that we want to add in. So I'm going to click on Add Reference Line. You'll notice that the reference line expression defaults to 0, which doesn't really make a lot of sense for a timeline. So what we're going to do is click on FX, and I'm going to just simply type in the date that or the pandemic declaration was made and hit Apply. When I do that, you'll notice that the reference line shows up here. And you can see that, and I didn't actually do this below, but let's go ahead and do this. We can actually change the color here. So I'm going to add in, make this a purple reference line. And if I wanted to, I can even make it dashed, but I'll keep it as solid. And let's give it a label. So we'll say COVID-19 declared, or pandemic declared, I guess. Pandemic declared. All right. And there we go. We see it. Now if I click edit, And if what you'll notice though is that right now I don't even have any selections being made. So now it's just showing up in general, which, this actually might not be a horrible thing to have in the timeline, but, for other agencies where they were not as affected by the COVID-19 declaration, then this is where using a show condition would come in handy, because again, HHS was probably the most affected agency. So come back here, and under my show condition, I'm going to be super lazy. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this into my show condition. Just as a little pro tip here, because maybe you're at home and you're like, I don't know how to use get field selections. How do I even know what parameters to use or how it works? If you click on this little question mark here, it actually hyperlinks any functions that are being used in this expression. And then if you select it, it'll open up and it'll take you to the help page where you can get some more information, in this case about get field selections, the parameters that are used. You can even see some examples down below. So again, a little pro tip for you there. All right, so we have our expression in here. I'm gonna go ahead and click apply. You'll notice that now that dimension reference line goes away. And if I hit edit and go back into analysis mode, now you will notice if I reapply my selection that now my dimension reference line shows up. So that is the first example, a conditional show for a chart property. We're going to do one more example of a conditional show for a chart property on the next sheet here. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the show condition for columns in a table. So what you can do, and this is another pretty straightforward technique, is that essentially you're going to provide just a certain amount of information based on user actions here. And you can assign a value of 0 to a column with your condition, which means don't show it in your show condition, or 1 if you do want the column to show. Now in this case, you'll notice that on our top table, we are showing spend all the way down to the award ID or the contract level. And so in general, if you look across the numbers here, they're going to be a lot less than they are down below because this is all the way at the contract level. This table is showing you spend at the funding sub-agency office and product or service level, right? So it's a bit more aggregated. There might be a case in this particular example where you only want to show maybe the date of the award and the actual award ID if you have honed in on a particular vendor or a particular recipient, right? So that is what we're going to use. We're going to use a show condition here that says if get possible count of recipient name equals 1, then go ahead and show it with the 1, or don't show it with the 0. So get possible count means there's only one possible recipient that is in play based on selections that have been made. Now you could also use get selected count, and if I'm being honest, in this particular case that might make a little bit more sense since we have just the recipient drop down here or filter here. But I like to use get possible count because what that means is it's kind of implied. In other words, if you've made some other selections that have inherently reduced your data set down to one particular recipient, then go ahead and show the dates and show the award ID columns. So it's another way to kind of get to the final destination, and it's a little bit more all-inclusive. So a lot of times I'll just use get possible count, but again, you could use get selected count. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go into edit mode, and I'm gonna go to my columns here, and I'm gonna find date and show column if. So here's our show column or our show condition for date. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the expression editor, and I'm gonna say if get possible count for recipient name equals 1, then go ahead and show it. If not, then don't show it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, hit apply. You'll notice when I add that condition there, it says the calculation condition is not fulfilled, so it's letting me know, hey, we are more than one recipient is currently in play. Now I'm gonna go to award ID, and I'm gonna go to my show column if expression editor. This time I'm actually gonna put in get selected counts just so you can see that they do in fact operate the same in this particular instance. Hit apply, And again, it's letting us know that that calculation condition has not been fulfilled. If I click edit, what you will notice now is that the top table looks just like our bottom table, right? But now let's say I pretend I want to look into a particular recipient. I want to look into, I don't know, accent controls. When I do that, you'll notice on both the top and the bottom now the date and award ID columns are showing up. All right, just like we would expect. So now it's getting us that lowest level of detail there. All right, moving on to our next sheet. All right, so we've showed you how you can use show conditions within specific elements of a particular chart. Now we're actually going to use variables and containers like I talked about before. And you're going to see down below, so this is using, this right here is a container. It actually has two visualizations inside of it, a map view and a line chart visualization. And you'll see you can actually toggle them here. So if I wanted, as a user, I wanted to look at the timeline of spend, I could toggle that on. Or if I wanted to look at a map, I could do that. Now, this is a very, very basic example. Like in this case, you could clearly show both of those charts on the same dashboard. It would probably be fine. But if you imagine that you had a lot of other visualization objects on the screen, this might be an example where you'd want to condense them and take advantage of the container as far as screen real estate is concerned. So let's go ahead and put it together. You'll notice that there are there's going to be a few steps that are involved here, but I'll walk you through it. All right, so go ahead and click edit. And we're going to start by just adding a container object over here to the side. So I'm going to go to my charts and I'll go to my container object and add that, just drag that over here. And I'm going to go ahead and click add. And it's going to show me two master items that I can add in. Now this is kind of a side note. Hopefully you all are familiar with master items. If you're not, essentially these are building blocks that you can use to make it very easy for users to add visualizations to their dashboards. It gives you consistency and accuracy because they've already been defined by you, the developer, so you know that all of your measures have been defined correctly. Even sometimes when there's maybe, as you can see in this example, there's a little bit more complexity that's built in, but as a user, you don't necessarily need to worry about how it's defined. All you need to do is just drag it onto your dashboard. So just a good way to make sure that you have consistent results in your dashboards. You can also, some people don't know this, you can actually have master item visualizations. So we have two that have been built here. So we're gonna, when you click add, it actually shows you those two master item visualizations. So map of spending is one, so we'll add that in. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in another one. Actually, this time I'll just drag the timeline onto my chart, add that to my container, and there you go. So now you have the ability to toggle back and forth. And that might actually just be fine. But again, we want to actually give the user the ability to use buttons to control what is actually showed on the screen. So go ahead and we'll click edit. And what we're going to do is give ourselves a little bit of space to add in our variable input. I didn't mention this before, but this is part of the Qlik dashboard bundle. There's a thing called variable input, and it essentially allows you to control how variables are toggled on and off. I'll go ahead and add it here. And then before we go through and we add in the different buttons, what we need to do is actually add a variable. So we go to our variable overview just by clicking down here. And you can see that we already have a variable called vSpending that has a value of map. But I'm just, for purposes of showing you, I'm going to go ahead and just create another one. I'm going to call this vSpending 2. All right. And the definition will be map, just like it was before. And we'll hit create. And now we have vSpending and vSpending 2, both with map as the value and the definition. All right. So essentially, remember, not to make this confusing, but a variable is kind of like a container in this case, where it currently contains the value of map. The goal, though, is to use this variable input object to allow the user to toggle and change the value of that variable. And when they do that, it's going to actually change what's displayed in the container using these show conditions down below, which we're going to get to in just a bit. All right, so let's get back to the variable input object. We're going to go to Appearance. We're going to go to Variable. And I'm going to go ahead and select, in this case, I could select vSpending, but I'll just do the one that just created vSpending 2. Show this as buttons. And for values, we're going to use fixed values. And we're going to add alternative. And I'm going to say the value is going to be map. And the label is going to be map view. You'll notice we have our button up here at the top. And add another alternative. This time we're going to call the value time. So when the user selects that button, it's going to now change the variable of vSpending2 to contain the value of time. And the label for this button is going to be timeline view. There we go. So if I go ahead and I change the buttons here, first off, well, nothing is actually occurring just yet, right? Because we don't have a show condition in play, right? So we need to add in this show condition. We can go ahead and toggle these buttons all day long, but it's not going to do anything until we add in the show condition. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my container. I'm going to click on Content, go to Map of Spending, and I'm going to use this show condition here. Again, I'm going to be lazy and just copy this. And I'm going to say if vSpending, so the name of our variable, but in this case we'll add in number 2. If vSpending equals map, then we want to show it. Else, go ahead and don't show it, right? You might be wondering about this $sign and why our variable is enclosed with these parentheses, what that's all about. This is called $sign expansion, and what it does is it actually evaluates within the variable in this case. So we can, down below, we can see it says if map equals map, right? Because it's evaluating what's inside that variable and it's letting us know, hey, right now it's toggled to map. So if I click Apply, you'll notice that, well, it's a map right now, but if I, actually it's going to stay a map even after I add the show condition over here, because we currently have the map view button selected, and that's what's the variable is still set to map. But let's go ahead and add in the show condition over here. So if vSpending2, in this case, if it equals time, then we want to show the timeline chart. And if not, then don't show it. Click Apply. And now, after these steps, in theory, if I click Timeline, there we go. It is switching back and forth, just like we would expect. Now, one other final change to make here, you'll notice down below, there's no tab, right? So if you want a bit more of a cleaner experience, then you would probably want to get rid of the tabs. You don't really need them in this case. Typically, you would use those tabs in play if you just wanted to let the user just simply click on the tabs to change their view. So let's go ahead and get rid of that tab. Go to Appearance. I'm going to go to Container. And it says currently its tabs are on. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And now, you'll notice if I click on Timeline, that you can see it is now fully operational, just like we would expect. All right, so as I mentioned before up front, I wanted to actually show you another example of using containers to show and hide specific visualizations. So we built we built a prototype for Department of Homeland Security for the Insider Threat Program. Now this is all mock data, please note that. But they wanted to get a better understanding of how they could use Qlik to actually identify employees in their midst that might be bad actors. That could be, I don't know, acting badly, maybe have some sort of malicious behavior, right? So you can see that we have a map of where the employees are located, some details about the employees, and then some stressors and behaviors on the left-hand side that might be indicative of a bad employee. So in this case, we want to look at employees that might be traveling to foreign countries that, I don't know, might be doing shady stuff in these foreign countries. So first off, I want to just point out the fact that there's only 2 tabs here. So if I go to foreign contacts and I search on travel, if I can typing is hard, and I select, all right, show me all the employees that have done foreign travel to countries of concern or these other traveling values here, and you'll notice that now a 3rd tab pops up, and if I click on this actually gives you the actual routes that employees have taken to specific countries. So we can see the destination country, how long they were in country, how many times they flew over, etc. Now, so this is a pretty cool visualization, but it's not necessarily a visualization that you might want to just have in general up there because it's not going to apply to the vast number of the employees in this mock data set, right? There's only 29 employees that have done this travel out of 1,000 employees, right? So again, this is just an example of how you could use show hide within a container to just show you or display a chart that is relevant based on the user's selections. In this case, it's not using a variable, it's actually using that get field selections, and it's saying, hey, anytime these particular sort of values are selected from the foreign contacts field, then go ahead and show this particular chart. We're actually going to come back to this example in just a moment, but just wanted to show you just another example of show hide within containers. All right, moving on. Calculation condition. This is actually something I debated whether to show or not because it's not technically like a show condition or explicitly written as a show condition in the properties, but in this case it basically acts in the same exact way. So a calculation condition, if you're not familiar with this, they are a great way to hide complex charts that might be processing really large volumes of data. So if you've got an app with a lot of data and some really complicated charts, a lot of times those charts might take a while to render when a user goes through that particular sheet with those charts on it, right? So what you can use is a calculation condition to say, hey, only render this chart if the user has made some selections that will get the essentially get the subset of data down to a smaller, more manageable size where it makes sense to actually render this chart. So in this case, we're using this on the map, right? We've got a couple different layers that we're showing, and if I'm being honest, showing 2 layers in this case is not that big of a deal, but you'll notice that on the bottom one, it will show the recipients only if you select. It'll show that point layer only if you select a particular country. So a little bit more of a cleaner experience. But if you imagine if you had a map with 5 or 6 different layers, it'd be really busy, right? So that's where you would want to use calculation conditions or even variables and buttons to be able to toggle on and off particular layers. So we're going to use this calculation condition here that says, hey, only show the point layer if the recipient country code equals 1. So I'm going to go ahead and click edit, go to my map, go to my layers, go to my point layer, go to layer display, and then you'll notice there is this calculation condition here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, only show this if this condition is met, where the count of recipient country code equals 1. Click apply. You'll notice the points, that point layer goes away. And now if I select a country, it shows up. Wait a minute, why is it not showing up? Select a single country to show recipients. Oh, you know what? I forgot to add in distinct. This is, you know what? I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose just to show you a common mistake that users will make. So the reason why it didn't show up is because country code in the underlying data is repeated multiple times, right? And so really you want to say, you know, if US is repeated, I don't know, 100 times in the underlying data, it's not going to fulfill the condition. But if you use the reserved word distinct, then we're saying, okay, anytime unique instances of this country code show up. So even though it might show up 100 times in the underlying data, there's only one unique instance of the US. So now, for adding that, what you will notice, hey, there we go. Now our recipients are showing up. And I even had this here to cheat off of, and I still got it wrong. Just kidding. Again, I was just showing you common mistakes. All right, last example here of show hide is at the sheet level. So we've covered it at the chart level. We've covered it at the we covered it at the chart property level, then the chart level. Now we're showing you show conditions at the sheet level. So this particular sheet is a whole sheet that's dedicated to giving you information about a particular recipient. So the recipient name, the location of the recipient or the vendor, its DUNS number, etc., and then information about, hey, where is this vendor located, when were awards made to this vendor, etc. So you'll hear views like this referred to as a baseball card view. So it's like a baseball card, you know, that gives you all the information about a particular player, right? So, but it doesn't really make sense to have this sheet open all the time, right? You really only want this sheet to be active when one particular recipient has been selected, which is why the show condition of get possible count recipient name equals 1 is being used here. And again, you'll notice that no values are showing up here for the recipient name, because right now there's no selections that have been made, so it can't actually perform this calculation in a way that's going to make sense, so nothing is going to display here. So let's go ahead and we're going to click edit. We're going to go to the sheet conditions. Now to go to the sheet conditions, actually it's going to default to the sheet conditions initially when you hit edit, but if you click on a chart, you'll notice you'll have all the properties of that particular chart, but we want to go to the sheet, so I'm going to go ahead and just select the sheet title here, and now we have our show condition in play. So I'm going to say if get possible count of recipient name equals 1, then show it. If not, then don't show it. Hit apply. And now if I click edit, you'll see it says, hey, the sheet is hidden. The content of the sheet is hidden by a show condition, so it's doing what we would expect. If I click on the sheets, you'll notice that that show condition sheet is no longer visible. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll go to an earlier sheet, I believe this sheet here, that has a recipient dropdown. Excuse me. And I'll go ahead and just select one of these vendors. And now if I click on sheets, you'll notice that our sheet show hide is visible here. Now if we go to it, and there you go. Now you can see it's giving us all the great information about this particular recipient. I can see where it's located. I can see when there were awards made, which apparently was just one time over this timeline. And there you go. If you selected a different recipient and maybe you got information over here, but your map didn't update, that might be because there's multiple locations for that particular recipient, so it doesn't know which one to use. So if you want, you can go ahead, if you want to be safe, you can go to your bookmarks, and I have actually bookmarked a couple recipients that I know for sure the map should update accordingly. There you go. Here's Bravura. You can see they've made multiple purchases here, or the DoD's made multiple purchases from them. Or we have Allison, good old Allison Transmission out in Indianapolis again. So there you go. Now, in case you're wondering, like, oh, well, what do I do if, the sheet disappears? How do I get back to it if I want to make changes or, that sort of thing? Or maybe I forget, what condition is used to actually even make this sheet visible. What do I do about that? Well, if you click on Edit, you go into Edit mode, then you click on the sheets. This is a little pro tip. You'll notice that the sheet now shows up with a little eye with a cross through it, with a little indicator letting us know that, hey, calculations, the condition has not been met to actually make this sheet show up, but I can still go to it and I can edit it if I wanted to that way. So just a little pro tip for you. And as I mentioned, I want to show you one other example of this in action. So getting back to this suspicious foreign activity, we notice that there's one particular individual here that has flown to China 5 times. They've spent a lot of time in country. And maybe we want to look into this particular person. We want to get more information about them. There's actually a couple different show highs that are being used here. You'll notice that the KPI here is there's a KPI that says 29 employees. If I select just one employee, it turns into a profile navigation button. And what I can do now is I can navigate to this particular sheet. And actually, you know what? I'm going to go back because I want to just kind of prove this out again. If I click on Sheets, you'll notice there's only 4 sheets here in play. And for my public sheets, and if I reapply that and I go back to my sheets, you'll see, hey, this employee profile sheet comes up. And if I click on this profile button, it takes us over here. Now we see all this great information about Constantina, where she's located, all this information here about Constantina. So this is another example of show high. And again, this is a true kind of baseball card view, as I was mentioning before. All right, so just to want to wrap things up here. So we've walked through how you use show conditions, again, at the chart object property level, at the chart level, and then at the sheet level. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how you can use show conditions in those particular areas. Finally, if I click on the references sheet here, you'll see that there are references to all the different functions, the variables, variable input control, when you want to use them. So if you select, for instance, variable input control, it'll take you over here to the help guide, give you more information about that. So hopefully this is helpful to you, and you've learned a few things or two. And yeah, let us know if you've got questions. Feel free to reach out to our team. We're always here to help. And anyway, have a great day. We will catch you on the flip side. All right, bye.